Our first story today, the UN Climate Summit has finally come to an end after weeks of negotiations by scores of nations with an agreement on how to tackle global warming. For the first time, countries have agreed on the historic loss and damage fund. This will help pay for the damage which an overheating world is inflicting specifically on poor countries. Listen in.
I now invite the COP to adopt the decision entitled Funding Arrangements for Responding to Loss and Damage associated with the adverse effects of climate change, including focus on addressing loss and damage, contained in document FCCC/CP/2022/L18, FCCC/PA/CMA/2022/L20.
And it is seen as a big win for the poorer countries which have long called for cash, sometimes viewed as reparation, because they are often the victims of climate-worsened floods, drought, heat waves, famines and storms, despite having contributed little to the pollution that heats up the globe. The fund would support countries suffering from the effects of climate change, such as Somalia, where more than 7 million people are facing hunger from an ongoing drought, or Pakistan, where floods this year caused around $30 billion of damage.
We have struggled for 30 years on this path, and today in Sharm el-Sheikh, this journey has achieved its first positive milestone. The establishment of a fund is not about dispensing charity. It is clearly a down payment on the longer investment in our joint futures. It is a down payment and an investment in climate justice.
Tired delegates applauded when the fund was adopted as the sun came up on Sunday following almost 2 extra days of round-the-clock negotiations. But jubilation over that achievement was countered with stern warnings. The UN chief Antonio Guterres welcomed the fund for loss, but said that the world still needs a giant leap on climate ambition.
But let's be clear, our planet is still in the emergency room. We need to drastically reduce emissions now, and this is an issue this COP did not address. A fund for loss and damage is essential, but it's not an answer if the climate crisis washes a small island state off the map or turns an entire African country to desert. The world still needs a giant leap on climate ambition.
The summit has left a few nations disappointed over a failure to push further on cutting emissions. The calls to phase out fossil fuels were blocked by oil-producing states, and some delegates struggle to find reasons to be cheerful at the glacial pace of decarbonization, since no progress was made on making additional efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Moreover, as countries fail to commit to phasing out or even phasing down all fossil fuels, climate scientists and experts have warned that stronger action and sharper cuts are necessary to limit global warming.
This is the make or break decade. But what we have in front of us is not enough of a step forward for people and planet. It does not bring enough added efforts from major emitters to increase and accelerate their emissions cuts. It does not bring a higher degree of confidence that we will achieve the commitments made under the Paris Agreement and in Glasgow last year. It does not address the yawning gap between climate science and our climate policy.
The COP26 President Alok Sharma was also critical of the final text in his closing comments, saying that the goal of limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels remains on life support.
Emissions peaking before 2025, as the science tells us, is necessary. Not in this text. Clear follow-through on the phase-down of coal. Not in this text. A clear commitment to phase out all fossil fuels. Not in this text. And the energy text weakened in the final minutes. Friends, I said in Glasgow that the pulse of 1.5 degrees was weak. Unfortunately, it remains on life support.
For more analysis, we are now being joined by Eric Solheim from Nice. He is the former UN Environment Executive Director and Under Secretary General of the United Nations. Welcome to the broadcast, Eric.
Thank you so much.
Right, Eric, before I talk about the Loss and Damage Fund, which of course was a controversial topic at this summit, I want to ask you simply, did you think the COP27 was a success Or like many others are saying, it was a damn squib?
My view is somewhat in between. It was not a major success, nor a major failure. But if you want to look for the reasons for optimism, we cannot look to the diplomacy. Diplomacy is making very, very small steps, one after the other, one climate conference making a small step, and then next to make another small step. Where we see the giant leaps is in the political economy. President Lula of Brazil will drastically reduce deforestation in Amazon when he comes into power from January 1st. President Xi of China has made China the #1 powerhouse for any renewable energy anywhere in the world. They made 82% in China of all solar panels in the world last year. And Prime Minister Modi in India is encouraging and opening new solar plants by the day. I mean, last weekend he was in the state of Arunachal Pradesh initiating hydropower. So a lot is happening in the political economy, but the diplomatic process is very slow.
Right, you're saying the diplomatic process is very slow. Let's talk about the loss and damage fund now. It was almost as if it was a last resort to save face. When nothing concrete was coming out of the COP27, the world was watching for some major outcome. And then finally, after 2 extra days of negotiations, you had the establishment of this so-called fund. Do you think it will reap any benefits for poorer countries?
It's a very big, important principle victory for developing nations, because for very, very long, they have argued that, hey, we in the small island development states, or we in Africa, has hardly contributed at all to the climate crisis. The climate crisis is caused mainly by North America and by Europe, so you should pay for our losses. That has been a demand for very long, very fair, absolute just demand from developing countries. So it's good that that principle is established. However, the fund is not capitalized, there is no money in the fund, and it's highly unlikely that Europe and North America will pay even close to the amounts which should be needed into this fund. So developing nations do very well by looking into how they can establish the domestic resources for green growth.
Right. Just a final question there, Eric. How will this fund, this loss and damage fund, actually function? Some have called it as a reparation of sorts. Others are saying that it's not charity, it's actually a down payment of sorts for the damages inflicted. What are your takes?
I think the political principle is very clear. This is not charity. This is a payment for the problems and the crisis caused by Europe and North America to less developed countries. So they should pay for the damage. I mean, you gave 2 examples initially here. The flood in Pakistan this year was an enormous cost to Pakistan, and the hunger and the drought in Somalia is a huge cost to the people of Somalia. So Europe and North America should pay for this damage cost. However, still, there is no money in the fund. There's no agreement as to how it will function. So that's why I recommend for any leading and developing nations, please continue to push for this fund. But at the same time, please focus on how you can create the domestic policies for green growth at home, tapping into the enormous opportunities for solar, for wind, for hydro, for electric mobility, and for tree planting and greening of your land.
Right, Eric Solheim, thank you so much for all those inputs, and thanks for joining us on WION's Climate Tracker today. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.